The storm hit Wyoming hard that November night. Lightning split the black sky in half, and thunder rolled across the mountains like God himself was angry. Rain came down in sheets, so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. It was the kind of night that made smart folks stay inside by the fire, the kind of night where nothing good ever happened. Levi Grant sat alone in his ranch house, staring at a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink. He never drank it, just poured it every night and let it sit there until morning, then dumped it down the sink. Some men drowned their sorrows. Levi just looked at his and let them stare back. The house was clean but empty. No pictures on the walls. No music playing. Just the sound of wind howling through the pines and rain hammering the roof. That's how Levi liked it. Quiet. Simple. Alone. He'd lived this way for 7 years. 7 long years since the fire took everything that mattered. His wife, Sarah. His little girl, Grace. Just 6 years old with pigtails and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Levi had been working late that night, fixing a fence on the far end of the property. By the time he saw the smoke and rode back, the house was already gone. The new house he built looked just like the old one on the outside, but inside it was hollow, just like him. The folks in town had tried to help at first, brought casseroles and kind words. The church ladies came by with offers to clean or cook. Then came the single women, one by one, thinking maybe they could thaw the ice around his heart. Miss Clara from the general store with her apple pies. Lorna James with her shy smiles and Sunday dresses. Even the preacher's sister tried her luck. Levi turned them all away with the same quiet words. I appreciate the thought, but no thank you. After a while, they stopped coming. The whole county knew about Levi Grant, the man who said no to everyone and everything. Tonight was like every other night. Check the horses. Feed the dog. Sit with the ghosts. Levi was just reaching to turn off the lamp when he heard it. 3 knocks on the door. Slow, deliberate, loud enough to cut through the storm. Levi froze. Nobody came here. Not anymore. Not for years. His hand moved to the rifle by the door out of pure instinct. Living alone in the middle of nowhere, a man learned to be careful. He waited, listening. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a branch blown against the house. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Levi opened the door and stopped breathing. 3 little girls stood on his porch, soaked to the bone and shivering. The oldest couldn't have been more than 11, standing in front like a shield, protecting the 2 smaller ones behind her. The middle one, maybe 7 or 8, had brown eyes that were trying hard not to cry. And the smallest, barely tall enough to reach the doorknob, was clutching a stuffed rabbit that was just as wet as she was. Mister, the oldest girl said, her voice shaking from cold or fear or both. Can you give us a place to stay? Levi felt the world tilt sideways. 7 years. 7 years since he'd heard a child's voice in this house. 7 years since he'd seen little hands and scared eyes and everything that reminded him of what he'd lost. His throat closed up. His chest got tight. Every instinct screamed at him to close the door, to protect himself from this, to stay in his safe, cold, empty world where nothing could hurt him anymore. Then the smallest girl's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. The oldest girl caught her before she hit the ground, but barely. Ruby, she cried out, holding her little sister up with arms that were shaking. Please, mister. She's sick. She needs help. Levi's body moved before his brain caught up. He scooped the little one up in his arms. She was burning hot with fever, her face flushed red even as she shivered. The other 2 girls followed him inside without being asked, dripping rainwater all over his clean floors. Levi didn't care. He carried the sick child to the couch and laid her down gentle as he could. When did she get sick? Levi asked, his voice rough from not using it much. 2 days ago, the oldest girl said. We've been walking, trying to find shelter. The rain made it worse. Levi looked at these 3 girls, really looked at them. Their clothes were worn and dirty. Their shoes had holes. The middle one's coat was 2 sizes too small. They had the look of children who'd been on the road too long, who'd seen things kids shouldn't see. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in war, in men who'd survived things that broke them from the inside. "Stay here," Levi said. He went to the bathroom and came back with towels, all the towels he had. "Dry off. I'll make something hot to drink." In the kitchen, Levi's hands shook as he heated up soup from a can. He found crackers in the cupboard, some cheese that wasn't too old. His mind was racing. Where were these girls from? Where were their parents? What were 3 children doing alone in a storm in the middle of nowhere? And why did they have to knock on his door? When he came back, the girls had dried off as best they could. They sat close together on the couch, the oldest in the middle with an arm around each of the others. Protective, ready to run, not trusting him one bit. "Smart girls. Eat," Levi said, setting the food on the coffee table. "Slowly. Don't make yourselves sick." The girls attacked the food like they hadn't eaten in days. Maybe they hadn't. The oldest tried to eat slow, tried to set an example, but Levi could see the hunger in her eyes. The middle one ate and cried at the same time, tears mixing with soup. The little one, Ruby, was awake now, but weak, nibbling on crackers. "What are your names?" Levi asked, keeping his distance, trying not to scare them more than they already were. "I'm Nora," the oldest said, her voice guarded. "This is Evie, and that's Ruby." Last names. Nora's jaw set firm. "Just Nora, Evie, and Ruby. That's all you need to know." Levi nodded. He understood running from something. He understood secrets. "Fair enough. I'm Levi. Levi Grant. This is my ranch." "Thank you for the food," Nora said, polite but cold. "We'll be gone in the morning. We just need to get out of the storm." "Where will you go?" "That's our business." Evie, the middle one, spoke up for the first time. Her voice was soft, hopeful. "Are you a real cowboy? Do you have horses?" "Evie, don't," Nora warned. "I'm just asking," Evie said. "I've never met a real cowboy before." Levi almost smiled. "Almost. Yeah, I got horses. A few cattle. Some chickens. It's a working ranch." "That sounds nice," Evie said, and the way she said it made Levi's chest hurt. Like she was imagining a home, a safe place, something these girls clearly didn't have. Ruby finished her crackers and looked up at Levi with eyes too big for her small face. "Mr. Levi," she whispered, "do you got any little girls?" The question hit Levi like a bullet. For a second he couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Nora shot her little sister a look that said she'd asked the wrong thing, but Ruby didn't understand why. "Not anymore," Levi finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The room went quiet except for the storm outside. Even Evie stopped asking questions. They all understood grief when they heard it. Levi stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with his hands. "There's a guest room down the hall. One bed, but it's big enough for all 3 of you. Bathroom's next to it. You can sleep there tonight." "Just tonight," Nora said firmly. "We'll leave first thing." "Storm's supposed to last through tomorrow," Levi said. It was a lie. He'd heard the weather report. Storm would clear by dawn. But looking at these 3 exhausted, scared little girls, looking at Ruby's flushed face and Evie's hopeful eyes and Nora's defensive shoulders, Levi couldn't make himself send them back out into the cold. He got them settled in the guest room, found some old shirts that would work as nightgowns. Nora stood guard while her sisters changed, watching Levi like he might turn dangerous any second. He didn't blame her. When he closed their door and walked down the hall, he stopped in front of another door, the one he kept locked, the one he hadn't opened in 7 years. Grace's room was on the other side of that door. Her bed with the pink blanket, her toys, her drawings still taped to the walls. Everything exactly as she'd left it the morning of the fire. Levi pressed his hand against the wood, feeling the weight of memories trying to crush him. Then he heard a sound from the guest room. Soft crying. Ruby was having a nightmare, and Evie was trying to comfort her. Nora's voice, low and gentle, singing a lullaby their mother probably taught them. Levi walked to his own room, sat on the edge of his bed, and put his head in his hands. He'd built a life around being alone, around not letting anyone in, around staying frozen in the moment he lost everything. It was safe that way. It didn't hurt that way. But three little girls had knocked on his door in the rain, and now they were sleeping down the hall. And for the first time in 7 years, Levi's house didn't feel quite so empty. That terrified him more than anything else in the world. Levi woke before dawn like he always did, but something was different. There were voices in his house. Soft ones, careful ones, but voices all the same. He'd almost convinced himself last night was a dream until he walked into the kitchen and found Nora already awake, sitting at the table with her arms crossed. "Road should be clear now," she said. "No good morning, no small talk. We'll be out of your way soon." Levi poured himself coffee and looked out the window. The storm had passed, leaving everything covered in mud and fallen branches. The roads were fine. He could let them go. Should let them go. That was the smart thing, the safe thing. But then he remembered Ruby's fever, remembered how they'd eaten like starving animals, remembered Nora's eyes that looked too old for an 11-year-old girl. "Where exactly are you three headed?" Levi asked. "East," Nora said. Not a real answer. "To family." Something like that. Levi sat down across from her. "You're lying?" Nora's face went hard. "We'll manage. We always do. How long have you been on the road?" "That's none of your business." "It became my business when you knocked on my door," Levi said. His voice was gentle but firm. He recognized a scared kid trying to be brave. "Where's your mama?" Something flickered in Nora's eyes. Pain, fresh and deep. "Gone," she whispered. 3 weeks ago. Cancer took her fast." "And your daddy?" "Left when I was 6. Don't know where, don't care." Levi felt his chest tighten. These girls were orphans, just like he was a widower. Both of them knew what it meant to lose everything. "So you three have been on your own for 3 weeks?" Nora nodded, and for the first time, her tough shell cracked a little. "Mama's brother came after the funeral. Uncle Ray. He said he'd take care of us, but—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "He wasn't a good man, Mr. Grant. The way he looked at me, the things he said. I knew we had to leave." Levi's hands curled into fists under the table. He'd seen men like that in his life. Men who hurt children. Men who deserved worse than prison. "So you took your sisters and ran." "I didn't have a choice. Social services would have split us up. Foster homes don't want 3 kids, especially not all at once. They would have sent Ruby to one family, Evie to another, and me somewhere else. We'd never see each other again." Nora's voice broke. "They're all I got left. I can't lose them too." Levi understood that feeling. The desperate need to hold on to something, anything, when the world takes everything away. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the sun come up over his land. Behind him, he heard Ruby and Evie waking up, their footsteps soft on the wooden floor. "Breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes, Levi said, not turning around. "After that, we'll talk about what happens next." The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Levi told himself it was temporary, just until he figured out what to do with 3 homeless girls. But somehow temporary stretched from 1 day to 2, then 3, then a week. The girls proved they weren't helpless. Nora fed the chickens every morning without being asked. Evie talked to the horses like they were her best friends, giving them ridiculous names like Sir Buttercup and Princess Toenail. Even little Ruby helped, carrying small buckets of water and collecting eggs in a basket almost as big as she was. Levi tried to keep his distance, to stay locked behind his walls. But it was hard when Evie asked him 1,000 questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether horses had dreams. It was hard when Ruby followed him everywhere, her small shadow never more than 3 feet away. It was hard when Nora looked at him with those guarded eyes and slowly, carefully, started to trust him just a little bit. One afternoon, Levi found Ruby standing outside a closed door in the hallway. The locked door. Grace's door. "What's in there?" Ruby asked, touching the wood with one small hand. Levi's throat went dry. "Nothing important." "Then how come it's locked?" "Because some doors are meant to stay closed." Ruby looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes. My mama used to say that locked doors just keep the sad stuff trapped inside. She said sometimes you gotta let the sad out so the happy can come back in. Before Levi could respond, Evie came running down the hall. Levi, Levi, one of the horses is acting weird. Can you come look? He followed Evie to the barn, grateful for the distraction. But Ruby's words stayed with him. Let the sad out so the happy can come back in. Maybe a 5-year-old understood something he'd spent 7 years trying to forget. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Levi sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold. His radio crackled with the weekly sheriff's report. Deputy Russ's voice came through clear, still looking for those 3 girls that went missing from Laramie County. Nora, Evie, and Ruby Quinn. Mother deceased. Last seen with maternal uncle. If anyone has information. Levi reached over and turned the radio off. He knew he should call it in. Should tell them the girls were here, safe. But then what? Social services would come. The girls would be separated. Nora's worst fear would come true. And this house would go back to being empty and quiet and dead. He walked to Grace's door and stood there for a long time. Finally, for the first time in 7 years, Levi pulled out his keys and unlocked it. The locked room stood open for the first time in 7 years. Nora, Evie, and Ruby clustered in the doorway, staring at what looked like a shrine frozen in time. A small bed with a pink coverlet, drawings taped to walls, stick figures holding hands, a house with too many windows, a son with an impossibly happy face. Toys arranged on shelves like museum pieces, untouched by dust only because Levi had cleaned them obsessively, unable to let go, but unwilling to disturb anything. Her name was Grace, Levi said, his voice rough as gravel. He stood behind the girls, hands shoved in his pockets because he didn't trust them not to shake. She was 6. There was a fire while I was working late at the neighbor's ranch. Electrical fault in the wiring. By the time I got home, he couldn't finish. Didn't need to. My wife, Sarah, died. Tried to get to her. I lost them both in one night. Ruby turned, her small face solemn with understanding that shouldn't belong to a 5-year-old. Is she in heaven with our mama? Levi's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. I reckon so. Evie reached out and carefully straightened one of Grace's drawings. She was a good drawer, she said quietly. Better than me. She'd have liked you 3. Levi admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. All of you. Grace was fierce like Nora, curious like you, Evie, and she had Ruby's smile. Nora studied the photos on Grace's dresser. A younger Levi with laugh lines instead of grief lines. A beautiful woman with kind eyes. A little girl missing her front teeth. You were different then, she observed. I was alive then, Levi said simply. After they died, I just existed, until 3 drowned rats showed up at my door. The weeks that followed felt like life, remembered how to flow forward instead of standing still. The house transformed in small ways. Evie's drawings appearing on the refrigerator, Ruby's laughter during breakfast, Nora's quiet competence as she learned to anticipate what needed doing before being asked. Levi taught them to ride, starting with the gentlest mare. Ruby was terrified until she wasn't. Then she was thrilled, demanding to go faster while Levi's heart lodged in his throat. Nora proved naturally gifted, controlling her horse with subtle commands that spoke to an intuitive understanding. Evie talked to the animals constantly, naming them ridiculous things like Sir Fluffington the barn cat and Princess Butterscotch the chicken. But the outside world couldn't be held at bay forever. Nora hadn't attended school in months. Evie had fallen behind in reading, and Ruby needed socialization beyond ranch animals and 3 adults. When Levi mentioned school, Nora's walls went up instantly. If we enroll, the state will find us, she said flatly. Can't hide forever, Levi replied, hating the truth of it. Mrs. Henderson solved the problem by arriving unannounced with textbooks and a plan. I'll tutor them here, she announced. Officially, they're not enrolled. Unofficially, they're my students. She fixed Levi with a knowing look. This town takes care of its own. And you're one of ours, Levi Grant, whether you've remembered it or not. The trouble came at the town market 2 weeks later. An older boy made fun of Ruby's too small coat, hand-me-down from Evie, already worn thin. Nora's fist connected with his nose before Levi could blink. Sheriff Davis had to pull her off while the boy wailed, and his mother shrieked threats about charges. Can't have her beating up local kids. Levi, the sheriff said wearily. Can't have local kids bullying a 5-year-old. Levi shot back, surprising himself with a fierce protectiveness in his voice. Later, Nora sat on the porch steps, defiant and ashamed in equal measure. Levi settled beside her, not touching but close enough that his presence said what words couldn't. Fighting solves nothing, he finally said. He hurt Ruby's feelings, Nora replied, jaw tight. And you hurt his nose. Now we're even. Levi shook his head. You would have done the same thing, Nora. I know you would have. But I'm telling you not to because I want better for you than what I became. A man who solved everything with anger and ended up alone. Something shifted in Nora's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition that Levi wasn't just disciplining her. He was trying to save her from his own mistakes. That night, Evie appeared in the kitchen doorway where Levi sat reviewing ranch accounts. She was in her nightgown, clutching a stuffed bear Evie had given her. Levi, she said quietly, are you going to keep us? 3 words. Simple question. Terror wrapped in hope. It's complicated, Levi managed. Evie's face fell. Grown-ups say that when the answer's no. She was right. He'd been living day to day, pretending this could last without facing legal reality, without admitting that keeping them meant committing, meant risking his heart again, meant accepting he could lose everything if he let himself love them. Nora appeared behind Evie, having heard everything. We'll leave, she said, voice carefully empty. We don't stay where we're not wanted. I didn't say that, Levi started. You didn't say you wanted us either. Nora cut him off, the truth landing like a blow. The girls retreated to their room. Levi sat alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing, hating himself for his cowardice. The next morning, before he could find the courage to fix what he'd broken, a government envelope arrived in the mail. State Services. Foster placement hearing in 2 weeks. Wards of estate. Siblings may be separated based on family availability. Nora read over his shoulder, her body going rigid. We'll run again. No, Levi said firmly. They'll split us up. Her voice cracked. I said no running. Levi turned to face all 3 girls, who'd gathered like small soldiers awaiting orders. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. We're not running. We're fighting. For the first time since they'd arrived, Nora looked young. Scared. Hopeful. Why? She whispered. Why do you care? Levi knelt down, so he was eye level with Ruby, who stood between her sisters. Because you 3 knocked on my door in the rain and gave me a reason to open it. Before you, I was just surviving, waiting to die, so I could see my family again. Now I'm living, and I'm not going back to that darkness. Not for anything. Even if they say no, Evie asked, tears streaming down her face. Then we appeal, Levi said. And appeal again. I'm not giving up on you 3. You're stuck with me. Ruby launched herself at him, wrapping small arms around his neck. Then Evie. Then Nora, hesitant but needing the anchor. Levi held them all, for broken people choosing to be whole together, while outside the window storm clouds gathered for the fight ahead. The lawyer's office in town smelled like old paper and lost causes. Levi sat across from David Shunn, a family law attorney who'd agreed to take the case after Martha had called in a favor. The girls waited outside in a reception area, pretending to read magazines while their futures hung in balance. I'll be straight with you, Mr. Grant, Chun said, shuffling through papers. Your case has complications. You're a single man with no spouse. You've lived in isolation for 7 years, and you have no legal standing with these children. The state prefers traditional 2-parent families, especially for sibling groups. He paused, reading Levi's expression. That said, if you're serious about this, we can try. But you need to understand, It's a long shot. I'm serious, Levi said without hesitation. What I need to do? Prove fitness, stability, community support. Home inspection, character witnesses, background checks. And pray the judge sees what you see, that these girls belong with you. When Levi emerged from the office, 3 pairs of eyes locked onto his face, reading his expression like their lives depended on it. Because they did. We're fighting, he told them, for you 3 to stay. Together. Ruby's lip trembled. Together? They won't split us up? Not if I have anything to say about it. Levi promised, and meant it with everything he had. The house became a whirlwind of preparation. The home inspection was scheduled for the following week, and Levi attacked the task like a military operation. He converted Grace's room for Ruby, letting her choose the paint color. She picked sunny yellow, so bright it hurt to look at, and Levi painted every wall twice to make it perfect. Nora and Evie's room got new beds, a bookshelf Levi built himself, and curtains Nora sewed from fabric Martha donated. The girls threw themselves into helping. Ruby organized her stuffed animals with intense concentration. Evie alphabetized the bookshelf 3 times, finding comfort in order. Nora worked alongside Levi in near silence, sanding wood and hammering nails, their shared labor speaking louder than words. What if they say no? Evie asked one evening while they painted. She held her brush carefully, trying not to drip. Levi stopped mid-stroke. Then we appeal. And if that doesn't work, we appeal again. I'm not giving up on you 3. You understand me. Nora, perched on a ladder nearby, went very still. Why? She asked quietly, not looking at him. Why are you doing this? Levi set down his paint roller and looked at all 3 girls. Paint splattered, exhausted, scared, brave. Because you knocked on my door in the rain and gave me a reason to open it, he said simply. Before you, I was just surviving, going through motions, waiting to die so I could see my family again. Now I'm living, and I'm not going back to that darkness. You 3 brought light back into this house. I'm not letting anyone take that away. Ruby climbed down from where she'd been taping edges and wrapped herself around his leg. Evie joined her. Nora stayed on the ladder, but her shoulders shook slightly, and Levi pretended not to notice the tears she was hiding. Ms. Patterson from Child Protective Services arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. She was efficient, professional, and had clearly seen too many cases to be swayed by sentiment. She inspected every room with a clipboard, noting exits, smoke detectors, childproofing measures. She interviewed the girls separately, asking questions Levi couldn't hear but could imagine. When Ruby emerged from her interview, she whispered, I told her you read to me every night and make the voices funny. Evie reported, I said you teach us stuff and actually listen when we talk. Nora said nothing, but squeezed Levi's hand once before heading to the barn. Finally, Miss Patterson sat across from Levi at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared countless meals, where Ruby did her coloring, where Evie read aloud, where Nora had slowly learned to lower her walls. Why do you want 3 children, Mr. Grant? Miss Patterson asked, pen poised over her notes. Levi met her eyes steadily. I don't want children, ma'am. I want these children, Nora, Evie, and Ruby, because they're brave and broken and healing. Just like me. You lost your family 7 years ago, she said carefully. Some might say you're trying to replace what you lost. I'm not replacing anyone, Levi said firmly. I'm honoring them. My daughter Grace would want me to help these girls. Their mother would want them safe and together. This is where they're safe. This is where they're loved. And I'll fight every bureaucrat and judge in this state to keep them here. Ms. Patterson made a note, her expression unreadable. The hearing is scheduled for Friday, she said. I'll submit my report before then. After she left, Levi found all 3 girls huddled together in Ruby's yellow room, holding hands like they could physically keep from being torn apart. Friday, Nora said flatly. 3 days. 3 days, Levi agreed. And then we show them what family looks like. But that night, lying awake and staring at the ceiling, Levi felt the old familiar fear creeping back. What if loving them wasn't enough? What if wanting to keep them together couldn't overcome bureaucratic preference for traditional families? What if he'd given these girls hope only to watch it get ripped away? In the darkness, he heard Ruby's nightmare start, small whimpers that would build to screams. He was at her door before she could fully wake, scooping her up, holding her close. "I got you," he whispered. "I got you, sweetheart. And I'm not letting go." Friday was coming. The fight of their lives was coming. But tonight, he had 3 girls sleeping under his roof, and he'd be damned if anyone took them without the fight he'd promised. The courthouse felt like a tomb built of marble and judgment. Levi tugged at his tie, borrowed from Deputy Russ, and felt like he was choking. He'd faced enemy fire in his military days with less fear than he felt watching Nora, Evie, and Ruby sit ramrod straight on the wooden bench, wearing their best clothes. Nora had braided her sister's hair with shaking hands that morning. Ruby clutched her stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. The state's attorney presented their case with clinical efficiency. Single male, no spouse, history of extended isolation following family tragedy, no prior childcare experience beyond his deceased daughter, minimal social connections. Each point landed like a hammer blow. Levi's military record was mentioned briefly, honorable discharge, but dismissed as irrelevant to childcare capabilities. Then David Chin stood, and the courtroom shifted. "Your Honor," the state seized paperwork. "We see a family." He gestured to where Martha sat in the gallery, flanked by Sheriff Davis, Mrs. Henderson, Deputy Russ, and a dozen other townspeople who'd closed their businesses to be there. The community would like to speak. Martha testified first, her voice steady and sure. "I've known Levi Grant for 20 years. After his family died, we watched him disappear inside himself. He was a ghost walking. Then 3 little girls showed up in a storm, and Levi Grant came back to life. Those girls save him as much as he saved them. That's not replacement, Your Honor. That's resurrection." Mrs. Henderson spoke about educational progress, Nora's voracious reading, Evie's mathematical aptitude, Ruby's social development. "I've been teaching for 32 years, she said firmly. "I know what thriving looks like. These girls are thriving." Sheriff Davis's testimony was simple and devastating. "Levi Grant is the most decent man I know. He'll protect those girls with his life. And this town will protect all 4 of them. We don't abandon our own." Then Nora was called to testify. She walked to the stand like she was walking to her execution, head high but terror in every line of her small body. The judge asked her general questions about living with Levi, about feeling safe, about what she wanted. Nora's voice started soft but grew stronger. "I know what bad looks like, Your Honor. I've seen bad. My uncle was bad. The places we hid before we found Levi's house, those were bad. I ran from bad with my sisters because I knew what it would do to us." She looked directly at the judge, this fierce 11-year-old who'd survived things no child should survive. "Levi is good. He's patient and kind, and he teaches us things. He makes us breakfast and reads to Ruby and helps me with homework even when he's tired. He doesn't yell or hit or scare us. He makes us feel safe." Her voice cracked. "Please don't split us up. We're family. Please." The courtroom was absolutely silent when Nora returned to her seat. Evie grabbed her hand. Ruby climbed into her lap. The state's attorney looked uncomfortable but pressed forward with procedural objections. Judge Morrison listened, made notes, revealed nothing. "I'll review all materials and deliver my decision within 72 hours, she said finally. Court adjourned. 72 hours. 3 days of agony. Levi took the girls to the cemetery on the second day. He'd never brought anyone there before. His grief had been too private, too raw. But standing at Grace and Sarah's graves with Nora, Evie, and Ruby felt right somehow. Like introducing them. Like asking permission he knew he'd already been given. "Grace, Sarah," Levi said quietly, one hand on Ruby's shoulder, the other on Nora's. Evie leaned against his side. These are Nora, Evie, and Ruby. They're scared, and honestly, I'm terrified. But I think you'd like them. I think you want me to do this. To try to be a father again. To let myself love again. Ruby knelt carefully and placed wildflowers she'd picked from the ranch on both graves. We'll take good care of your daddy, she promised solemnly. He takes real good care of us. Levi's eyes burned. The October wind rustled through the trees. For just a moment, he could have sworn he felt warmth on his shoulder, like a hand, like a blessing, like his wife telling him it was okay to move forward. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. They returned to the courthouse at 10 o'clock, filing into Judge Morrison's chambers. The judge looked tired, like she'd spent the 72 hours wrestling with a decision that would alter lives no matter which way she ruled. This isn't a regular situation, she began, and Levi's heart sank. Single guardian, 3 siblings, relatively short acquaintance period. By conventional standards, this placement violates several best practice protocols. The girls' hands found each other, Nora, Evie, Ruby, forming a chain of desperate hope. However, Judge Morrison continued, and Levi's heart stuttered. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates remarkable transformation in all parties. The children are healthy, educated, emotionally stable, and clearly bonded to Mr. Grant. They've expressed consistent and emphatic desire to remain together in his care. The community support is extraordinary. Most significantly, separating these children, who have already lost their mother and fled an abusive situation, would constitute demonstrable harm. The pause lasted forever. Ruby squeezed a rabbit so hard its stuffing threatened to escape. Therefore, Judge Morrison said, looking at each girl in turn before settling on Levi, I am granting temporary custody of Nora, Evie, and Ruby to Levi Grant. Permanent adoption hearing will be scheduled in 6 months, contingent on continued welfare and stability. Social services will conduct quarterly check-ins. She allowed herself a small smile. Mr. Grant, those girls are fortunate to have found you. Don't make me regret this decision. The world exploded into noise and motion. Evie screamed with joy. Ruby launched herself at Levi, who caught her reflexively, burying his face in her hair. Nora, stoic, careful Nora, finally let herself cry, great heaving sobs of relief she'd been holding back for months. David Chun was grinning. Martha was weeping openly. Sheriff Davis clapped Levi so hard on the back he nearly dropped Ruby. In the truck on the way home, the girls chattered and planned and dreamed out loud. Nora sat in front beside Levi, quieter than her sisters, but with something soft in her expression he'd never seen before. Thank you, she said quietly, just for him. Levi glanced at her, then back at the road. You don't thank family, Nora. She was silent for a moment. Is that what we are? If you'll have me. Nora's smile was small but real. Yeah, we'll have you. The ranch appeared over the hill. Home, not just house anymore. Home, with 3 girls who'd chosen him as much as he'd chosen them. Home, with 6 months to prove they belonged together permanently. Home, where healing happened and families were built from broken pieces. Welcome home, Levi said as they pulled into the driveway. Home, Ruby repeated happily from the back seat. Yes, Levi thought. Home, the first official morning as a family. Temporary custody granted, but official nonetheless. Began with chaos Levi was learning to love. Ruby appeared in his doorway at dawn, dragging her rabbit and asking if they could make pancakes. Evie followed minutes later with a book about constellations, eager to explain why Orion was her favorite. Nora emerged last, hair sleep mussed, attempting to wrangle her sisters toward getting dressed while simultaneously helping Levi locate the pancake mix. Top shelf, left side, she said without looking, somehow having memorized his kitchen better than he knew it himself. They ate breakfast as sunlight streamed through windows Levi had stopped keeping curtained. The girls had transformed this house from a mausoleum into something living. Ruby's drawings covered the refrigerator in crayon chaos. Evie's books colonized every flat surface. Nora's careful organization showed in labeled shelves and color-coded chore charts she'd created without being asked. The 6 months before permanent adoption became a strange, wonderful season of learning to be a family. Levi enrolled the girls in school officially. No more hiding, no more fear of the state finding them. Nora's first day, she came home with a friend's phone number, looking simultaneously pleased and terrified by this development. Evie joined a reading club and returned breathless with excitement about discussing books with other kids who loved stories as much as she did. Ruby's kindergarten teacher called to say she was a delight and surprisingly emotionally intelligent for her age. Ranch work became their shared rhythm. Levi taught them to ride properly. Nora proved fearless, taking to jumping like she'd been born to it. Evie preferred grooming the horses, talking to them in her endless stream of consciousness way. Ruby appointed herself chief chicken supervisor, collecting eggs each morning with intense concentration. Calving season arrived in early spring, and Levi let the girls help despite his instincts screaming to protect them from anything difficult. Nora assisted with a breech birth, her small hands steady while Levi guided her. When the calf finally came, wet and struggling, Nora's face shone with wonder. "We saved him," she whispered. "We did," Levi agreed. "That's what we do. We save each other." But it wasn't all smooth. Nora had nightmares about her uncle finding them, waking the house with screams. Levi would sit with her until dawn, not talking, just present. Evie went through a phase of asking obsessively if Levi was going to die like her mother, needing constant reassurance. Ruby developed separation anxiety, panicking if Levi was out of sight for too long. They worked through it together. Levi learned that consistency mattered more than perfection, that showing up was half the battle, that love looked like patience on the hard days. Holidays came, their first Thanksgiving as a family. Levi had spent 7 Thanksgivings alone, heating up canned soup, avoiding the day's significance. This year, Martha came with pies. Sheriff Davis brought his wife and kids. Mrs. Henderson contributed enough sides to feed an army. The house filled with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of people who cared. Nora helped Levi with the turkey, following instructions with her characteristic intensity. Evie set the table with elaborate place cards she'd made. Ruby appointed herself greeter, hugging everyone who entered like they were long-lost relatives. "Look at you," Martha said quietly to Levi while they washed dishes. "Look at what you've become." Levi glanced at the living room where the girls played with the sheriff's kids, their laughter bright and free. "They did this," he said. "Not me." "You did it together," Martha corrected. "That's what family means." Christmas arrived with snow and a tree the girls insisted on decorating with every ornament they could make or find. Levi contributed Grace's ornaments from storage, 7 years boxed away. Ruby hung them carefully while Nora and Evie watched. Understanding this was significant. "Grace is part of our family too," Evie said matter-of-factly, "even though she's in heaven." "Yeah." Levi managed around the tightness in his throat. "She is." Each girl bloomed in her own way. Nora learned to ask for help instead of carrying everything alone. She'd find Levi in a bar and say, "I'm scared about the math test," or "I had a bad dream about my uncle," and he'd stop whatever he was doing to listen. Evie's confidence grew. She tried out for the school play and landed a speaking role, performing with joy that made Levi's chest ache. Ruby's attachment became secure. She could play independently, knowing Levi would be there when she needed him. The permanent adoption hearing arrived in April, 6 months after the temporary custody. This time, there was less fear. Ms. Patterson's quarterly visits had shown continuous stability. The girls' school records proved academic and social progress. The community support hadn't wavered. Judge Morrison reviewed the materials with the same careful attention she'd shown before. Mr. Grant, the evidence of continued welfare exceeds expectations, she said. These children are thriving. This family is functioning beautifully. Therefore, I'm granting permanent adoption. Nora, Evie and Ruby are legally and permanently Nora Grant, Evie Grant, and Ruby Grant. The celebration at the ranch that evening was everything family should be. The whole town seemed to show up, potluck dishes covering every surface, kids running wild, adults telling stories and laughing. Levi stood on his porch watching the chaos. These people who'd carried him through the worst and celebrated with him now. Nora appeared beside him, no longer the guarded, terrified girl who'd knocked on his door 8 months ago. "Happy?" she asked. Terrified, Levi admitted. "Being this happy makes me scared I'll lose it." "That's dumb," Nora said bluntly, but with affection. "You taught me that fear doesn't protect you from pain. It just stops you from living." Levi laughed despite himself. "Using my own words against me? That's what daughters do, apparently." Nora said it casually, but her eyes watched for his reaction. "Yeah," Levi said, throat tight with emotion. "That's exactly what daughters do." Inside, someone called for family photos. Levi gathered his girls, his daughters, and they crowded together for the camera. Martha printed copies immediately, insisting Levi needed one for the mantle. That night, after the guests left and the girls were in bed, Levi placed the new photo beside Grace and Sarah's picture. Two families, both his, both loved. Past honored, future embraced, present held close. A storm rolled in as he stood there, spring thunder rumbling across the Wyoming sky. Rain began to fall, drumming on the roof in a rhythm he'd once dreaded. Now it sounded like music. He checked on the girls. Ruby was starfished across her yellow bed, rabbit tucked under one arm. Evie had fallen asleep reading, book open on her chest. Nora slept curled tight, but her face was peaceful. His daughters, his family, his life returned to him by 3 little girls who'd knocked on his door in the rain. From Ruby's room, a sleepy voice called, "Levi? Dad? Can you read us a story?" "Dad." The word pierced his heart in the best way. "Yeah, sweetheart," Levi called back, his voice rough with unshed tears. "I can do that." He gathered all 3 girls into Ruby's room, their nightly ritual now. They piled onto the bed, tucking themselves against him while he read with voices that made them giggle. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, warmth and light and love. Once, 3 little girls had knocked on a cowboy's door in the rain and saved his life by asking him to save theirs. Now they were forever bound, not by blood but by choice. By showing up, by choosing each other day after day. Sometimes the family you choose chooses you right back. And sometimes that's the best kind of family there is. Drop a red heart if this story touched your heart. Share if you believe in second chances and the healing power of chosen family. Because everyone deserves to be loved and everyone deserves to come home.